Most Americans should be well aware of the US's extensive, storied history, from the Mayflower's arrival to the 13 colonies to the Civil War to the present day with our now 50 states. Of course, several states such as Hawaii and Texas were famously their own countries before being annexed into the US and granted statehood. Texas fought a war for their independence before joining the Union, and, well, Hawaii was pretty much taken. But what many people don't know is that the small, snowy, maple syrup-filled state of Vermont was once a part of that short list. The list of US states that technically used to be their own sovereign nation. And while Vermont's sovereignty was long ago and was short-lived at only 14 years long, its effects can still be noticed in Vermont's political landscape today. And the story of just why the nation's second smallest state by population was once its own country is a fascinating one. The Republic of Vermont, or known then as the Independent State of Vermont, came into existence on January 15, 1777, just months after the 13 colonies declared independence on their own from Great Britain. And in fact, once upon a time, Vermont teamed up with the US during a handful of battles in the Revolutionary War. Ironically, even though independent Vermonters allied with the Revolution, the Continental Congress didn't recognize Vermont as a sovereign state. Well, not yet anyways. Vermont was not one of the original 13 colonies that America was founded on. This is important to note because Vermont did not declare independence from the newly formed United States, but from Great Britain, as the Crown claimed jurisdiction over its land claims in the Vermont territory. Before Vermont's independence as its own country, it was a collection of 28 or so towns under British rule, in land claimed by the British provinces of New Hampshire and New York. The land dispute between Vermont and the then British provinces is an important part of Vermont's decision to declare independence, as the disputes caused much turmoil between loyalists in the two provinces, destined to keep their portions of the disputed land for the Crown's sake, and those in Vermont seeking rebellion. However, in the months following July 4th, 1776, American politician and patriot Ethan Allen and his militia of Green Mountain Boys suppressed British loyalists in the disputed territory who opposed independence, and on January 15th, 1777, a convention of representatives from the towns in the territory declared the disputed region entirely independent, choosing the name the Republic of New Connecticut. A few months later, on June 2nd, 1777, the name was officially changed to Vermont, from the French Le Vermont, meaning the Green Mountains. In the beginning, the Vermont Republic had no intentions or wishes to be a part of the US, because if they did that, they'd have to give up land claims that was still under dispute by New York and New Hampshire. Remember, Vermont's Declaration of Independence included those disputed territories of New York and New Hampshire, once under British rule and now America, and Vermont was unwilling to give up those to join the 13 colonies, throughout the 1770s and 80s anyway. Vermont was preparing for conflict over these lands as well, as it quickly drafted a constitution just months after its independence. The settlers in Vermont justified their constitution on the same basis as the first state constitutions of the former colonies. Authority is derived from the people. They saw themselves as a distinct region outside of the legitimate jurisdiction of New York, possessing an identifiable population, or a people, entitled them to the same constitutional rights of self-government as other peoples in the American Confederacy. During its time as an independent state, the government issued its own coinage and currency and operated postal service. The currency was known as the Vermont copper, and its mint was operated in East Rupert from 1785 to 1788. In time, the governor of Vermont appointed commissioners or ambassadors to the American government seated in Philadelphia, and Vermont engaged in diplomatic negotiations with the US, the Netherlands, and France. But after a combined British Mohawk force raided several Vermont settlements in 1780, Ethan Allen led a group of Vermont politicians in secret discussions with the Governor General of the province of Quebec about returning Vermont to British rule, but this never amounted to anything. By the mid to late 1780s, Vermont recognized that it may have bit off more than it could chew with its independence. With large populous nations surrounding it, and with the American Confederacy growing more and more prosperous, Vermont expressed a desire to join the US and become the 14th state. This desire was clearly expressed in Vermont's symbolism during the time. Vermont's coins, minted in 1785 and 1786, bore the Latin inscription Stella Quarta Decima, meaning the 14th star. Additionally, the Great Seal of Vermont, designed by Ethan Allen's younger brother, Ira Allen, centrally features a 14-branched pine tree. Finally, on March 6, 1790, the legislature of New York consented to Vermont's statehood proposal, provided that a group of commissioners representing both New York and Vermont could agree on the boundary, and in October of that same year, they did. Vermont was admitted to the Union on March 4th, 1791. But even though that was the day Vermont became a part of the US, that wasn't necessarily the end of the idea of an independent Vermont. And that's because in 2003, the Second Vermont Republic organization was founded. It's a group within the state which seeks to restore the formerly independent status of the Vermont Republic, as it was from 1777 to 1791. It describes itself as a, quote, nonviolent citizens network and think tank opposed to the tyranny of corporate America and the US government, and is committed to the peaceful return of Vermont to its status as an independent republic and, more broadly, the dissolution of the Union, end quote. Well, that doesn't sound radical at all. The organization was founded by Thomas Naylor, a former Duke University economics professor and co-author of the 1997 book Downsizing the USA. The year after the organization's founding, a parade was held in Vermont's capital of Montpelier with a rally of over 300 people at the State House calling for Vermont independence. While 300 isn't much compared to Vermont's 650,000 person population, the organization behind the movement has held many conventions, informal votes, and radical declarations in the years since its founding. In 2007, the University of Vermont Center for Rural Studies released its annual Vermonter poll, which showed that 13% of eligible voters in Vermont supported secession. Following the results of the survey, members behind the movement stated in an op-ed in the Washington Post that, quote, Vermont did not join the Union to become a part of an empire. Some of us therefore seek permission to leave. End quote. But to those other 649,850 Vermonters who are not card-carrying members of the Second Vermont Republic organization, yeah, that's a real thing, there's probably no need to worry about a Vermont secession. And it's important to remember that this org was founded during a time of heightened political tensions from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan led by then Republican President George W. Bush. And it's likely safe to assume that Vermont's 57% Democrat-identifying population didn't much agree with the then current administration's foreign policy, and were thinking of a radical solution. By the way, that 57% figure is the highest in the nation. Vermont is the most blue state in the Union today, which I think is a large part of the state's going their own way mentality, which was evidently true in both 1777 and, at least to some degree, 2007. And based on the facts, I'd argue that that same sentiment still remains today. I guess it's one of the few things that both Democrats and Republicans can get behind on, the idea of true self-governing. Who would have thought? If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely consider subscribing to the channel. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers and beyond, and I'd love for you to be a part of the journey. I'll see you next week on Town City State.